Is it petty? Maybe. Am I going to back down from it? Absolutely not. I don't know. Call me an old fuddy-duddy. I'm literally sitting here crocheting, so you'd probably have every right to call me an old fuddy-duddy. Listeners, watchers, readers of all kind, welcome to another episode of the Unfinished TBR. I'm Hannah, and I do not have Allie and Kasey with me today, but obviously you can see a few different tweaks to the setup. I got some Christmas gifts that I am putting to good use today. The other girls have been sick and have babies that are sick, so we are making do, and I will give you my debrief in this episode. Also this week, we're going to have a Kasey's Corner, and we're going to try to have an Allie's Alley, the first one. So be looking forward to that, and let's get started with this December debrief. As you can see, dressed for the occasion. Anybody who's been here for a year and a half knows I am the theme dresser. If there is a theme, I will gladly dress for it. So I am Mrs. Claus, if you will. Maybe. And to fall into that a little bit more, since I get to be hands-free now, I'm going to be crocheting while we go over this debrief. Because this is supposed to be cozy, and this is supposed to be fun. And this is my idea of cozy and fun. So, let's get started, shall we? All right, so the first thing that we usually do is we cover what we are currently reading. I literally this morning at about 2:30 in the morning, couldn't sleep, so I started This Woven Kingdom, I believe is what it's called. And the story behind that is I was scrolling and I saw fan art for this book. And it was pretty. And so I got it on Kindle Unlimited. Because that's how my brain works. I have multiple books that I am trying to get through on my physical shelf. But no, I'm going to add stuff to my Kindle Unlimited library and start reading it instead. That's typically what I do. So I did that at about 2:30 this morning. So I'm about 2 chapters in. I am still, I've got full intentions of finishing the Skeleton Crew book by Stephen King, as well as the Sentinels in the Oakwood by J.P.S. Stalder. This month, I did buy myself a little Christmas gift of a book stand that will hold the books down for me so I can be doing. Obviously, I love hands-free so that I can crochet. So the more hands-free I've got, the more likely I am to be able to finish those physical books. So I have full intentions of finishing those this week. So sorry for the delay and getting them off of my currently reading shelf. About time. So here we go. And for anybody wondering, I'm going to be making a hat while we go about today. Okay, so I'm extremely disappointed that Allie isn't here to talk about this first one because I was so excited for the reveal. Anybody who's been here since last year, she had this super secret book. We made a schedule of who goes first and, going through the month and whatever. And she had put a little on one of them at the very end. And she surprised me by telling me that she had finished Harry Potter. So I was wanting to do the same thing with her this week. But of course, with her being sick and babies being sick, it just didn't work out. Because my first one of the month was Funny Story by Emily Henry, which you'll see in next episode is one of Allie's top books of the year. So I knew she would be absolutely excited about it, but hopefully she's watching and hopefully she's just as excited to hear that I've read it. So I listened on Libby. It finally became available. That's one of the books that was like several month wait, because I've had it on my Libby for months now, basically since she spoke so highly of it. So I finally listened from November 30th to December 1st. I was off on December 1st, and so I literally sat and crocheted and listened to the book all day long. It was the best day off. I do see why Allie bragged so much on this one. Emily Henry has a great sense of humor. Allie was right about that. She said her and Emily Henry's humor lined up, and oh my gosh, yes, 100%. I will say, I gave this book a 4.25. The biggest reason that it got a 4.25 instead of a 5 was because you're telling me everyone, and I mean everyone in the story, side characters included, had completely normal names. We had Daphne, we had Miles, Peter, Petra, Ashley. Very normal names, right? And yet Ashley's kid's name is Mulder. Mulder. Moulder. What? That's almost as bad as Gravity from Truly, Madly, Deeply. And we all know how much I hated that book. And also that I'm kind of taking a guess on how it's spelled because obviously I listened to it. But honestly, which one's better? Moulder or Molder? There's not a correct answer on this one. Both of them are horrendous. So obviously, that is the biggest reason this didn't get a five star from me. Is it petty? Maybe. Am I going to back down from it? Absolutely not. I think the trend of trying to come up with original names goes too far sometimes. I like original names. I've got a few in mind myself of what would be original names. But I know that there's a little bit too much. And Mulder and Gravity are too much. So that was, every time she said her name, or said his name, I was absolutely floored. So the ending, I really respected her decision to not live with Miles at the end, and figure herself out first. I think that showed maturity. I think a lot of books don't do that. I think they rush it because that's what people are expecting. The couple gets together, so they're gonna end up living together. No, she still made the decision to have her own house. She still made the decision to have her own friends and to do her own thing. And I respect that. I think that's a really good lesson for everybody. Anybody who is in a relationship that, it's still good to be your own person and still have your own space. It's pretty important. Miles and Daphne's first kiss. Holy cow. I was melting. It was all for show, but I was melting. I pride myself on the ability to keep my face neutral during incredibly steamy scenes that I might be reading in public. I pride myself in that. That takes a lot of practice, and I feel like I've gotten good. But something about the sweetness of that kiss, and it was just sometimes just characters plain kissing for the first time, or in a unexpected way, or in a something's shifted type of way. It gets me absolutely cheesing. I was sitting there doing laundry, just cheesing as I was listening to their first kiss. It was, oh my gosh. And that was one of the scenes that gets me kicking my feet. I love it. I thought it was really smart the way Emily Henry would put the countdown above the chapter numbers. So if something happened in the chapter that made her resolve to leave firm, it would do the countdown to leaving. But then there were other scenes where it kind of made her want to stay, and it started to become a question on that countdown on whether she was going to leave or not. You could tell in the way that the countdown was worded whether she was thinking about leaving or not. Again, don't know if that was intentional or not, but I feel like it kind of had to be. There were definitely a couple where it was 100% firm. That's exactly what she was after. There were some that it was a little bit questionable. Like, basically any time that Miles was a little more distant and not as forthcoming and stuff, that's when the countdown was for sure. But then whenever they would go on these little dates and, go hang out together and go exploring together, it would be just a more subtle countdown, not necessarily to leaving, just to the event that she was staying for. So that's so smart. That's so smart, and I love it. My final note, friends to lovers is the best way. Am I a little bit biased because that's how me and my husband got together? Yes, but it's the best way. I gave it 4.25 out of 5. Like I said, it is a 4.3 overall, so maybe other people agree with my assessment that Mulder is a terrible name, and that's the only reason to bump it down from a 5. It is on Libby. The cheapest option is $9.92 on Audible. That's with a membership, so that is cheaper than a credit. All right, next, I listened to Never a Hero by Vanessa Lynn. If you remember from a few months back, I think it was September, I had actually DNF'd this one for the only reason being that this is the sequel to Only a Monster, and I hadn't read that in about a year. It had been about a year since I'd read it. So obviously, having read, I'm pretty sure at that point it was like 70 books in between then. No, probably even more, because I read 92 in 2024. So it was probably close to 85 or 90 books between those reads. Obviously, I had forgotten what was going on. So I decided to DNF at that time, put a hold on, and read the first one again before continuing on to the second one. So funny enough, this is the second time I've noticed mistakes in an audiobook. We talked about in Brimstone the bliss of listening to the book rather than physically reading the book. Me and Allie didn't see nearly the amount of mistakes that Kasey caught with her physical read. So to find a mistake in an audiobook is pretty interesting, I feel like. And in this one, it was, for anybody curious, there were 2 mistakes actually. The first mistake was in chapter 10. She says the same line twice and with the same inflection. There was no discernible difference between the 2 lines. So I'm not 100% sure if that was just I don't know what kind of editing mistake that would have been. I'm not sure. But either way, very interesting. And then the second mistake was in chapter 15. She takes a moment to clear her throat. Obviously, I understand that. I feel like we clear our throat on a regular basis here on the podcast. So I 100% understand it. It's one of those things, I don't fault them. It's more oh my gosh, I caught something. I like it. Anyway, to the story itself, because that's what the review is really about, not about the audio quality. The magic in this is so original and so thought-provoking. Joan is between a rock and a hard place in all of these books. She has an impossible decision to make. It is a sequel to a book, so I'm not going to read the description, but it's about these monsters, and what they do is they steal life from humans to be able to travel in time. There's some monsters that don't care to travel thousands of years, and so they have to take life from thousands and thousands of humans to make those trips to and from the past, the present, wherever they want to go. And there's monsters that think it's their birthright. And Joan is half human, half monster, and isn't sure how she feels about it. She is appalled by it because she's part human. Her dad's human. Somebody could take life from him. So as far as the characters go, Nick is 100% my top. He's brawny, but he's got brains as well. He's not just muscle. He's got brains as well. He's got that like kind of bearish look to him where he's just got muscles, and you could tell he'd give a solid hug. But Aaron in this book is so beautiful. I kept finding myself rooting for him more and more, even though Nick and Joan are the star-crossed lovers of the book. Like, that's kind of like the whole point, is a monster fell in love with the hero. And it's star-crossed and everything. So it was impossible decision. I think this is classified as a young adult book, and I wouldn't disagree with that up to this point if it weren't for the 5 or 6 F-bombs that were in this book. There weren't any in the first book, and everything, but I don't know. Call me an old fuddy-duddy. I'm literally sitting here crocheting, so you'd probably have every right to call me an old fuddy-duddy, but I just think if it's a young adult book, you should keep it limited. I think about movies. So a PG-13 movie is, it's supposed to only have one F-bomb in it. And that is not to be used in a sexual content, specifically any other content except for sexual. They get one shot. That's it. And anything above that will bump it up from a PG-13 rating. I think the same should be applied to young adult books. I do remember there being an F-bomb in Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. That is the only one in the entire Shadowhunter series. All of her series, that is the only one that I remember hearing. And I remember it floored me. Whenever I heard it for the first time, whenever I read it for the first time, I was genuinely floored, because I wasn't expecting it, because it hadn't been in any of the other series. So for this one to have 5 or 6, I don't think it's necessary. I understand a, damn here and there, or a ass here and there. I get that. Those are kind of mild. Those are kind of normalized. But the F word is so harsh. The F word is really in your face about being the F word. So I don't know. It felt weird having that many in a young adult book. So I wouldn't recommend it to young adults. And it's such a shame, because if you read the first one, there's none of that in it. And so if a young adult were to pick up the first one and then the second one have all that in it, that's a real shame. Overall, great book, great story. I was looking forward to book number 3 immediately after this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It is a 4 overall. And it is on Libby, and $8.99 on Kindle is the cheapest option. Next, I read Once a Villain by Vanessa Lynn, book number 3 of the series. I listened from December 8th to December 10th. Again, more F-bombs in this one, probably more than the second one. So my feelings on that still stand. Young adult who? I don't feel like this should be classified as young adult. About a quarter of the way through the book, I started to get this feeling that she was hinting at the possibility of a polyamorous relationship. Again, keep in mind that this is a young adult book. Going back to Cassandra Clare's series, specifically the one that had the F-bomb in it, which is the Dark Artifices series. She has a polyamorous relationship in that one. Something about it felt different than the Queen of Air and Darkness side. But I can't explain how, because it's been so long since I've reread those books. So one of my things that I'm going to do this year is I'm going to reread all of my Shadowhunter books and try to pick out what is different between, because I've noticed that some of these books that I've read recently, they have similar concepts to things that are, specifically this series, to be honest. Like, it's mainly this series. They have similar concepts, similar things happen as far as the relationship of the characters. And I didn't like it in this book, but I don't remember minding it as much in the Dark Artifices. So I need to know if I'm being hypocritical or if it's just different. So I'm going to be rereading those this year to get a feeling of what the vibe is now. Maybe my brain is fully developed now, because it wasn't fully developed at the time when I last reread those books. So maybe my brain is just fully developed now and I see it as a problem. Or maybe Cassandra Clare just does it better. That's fine if she does. I mean, but I want to make sure I'm not being hypocritical. That's the last thing I want to be. I thought the polyamorous side was just going to be a meme at first. Like Aaron brought Joan and Nick along with him, and they had to play like other people from a different time period, and everybody thought that he had brought them back with him to have fun with them, both of them. And so like they were awkward about it, and they were like, oh yeah, we gotta act like this, but we don't actually have to do it, you know. Later on, it ended up being a discussion that they ended up having, because in another timeline where Joan was dead, the boys were a couple. And so they had to face that. They had to talk about that and how they were all tied up together. They were all star-crossed lovers. And when one was gone, the other two got together. And no matter how the cake was sliced. So one of the things that really bothered me in this book was at one point Nick has died, and they, like that night, Joan and Aaron go back to his place, which was dumb in and of itself because they were running from the law, basically. So to go back to his house was kind of a dead giveaway. I thought that was weird. But they needed the privacy because they started having sex. And it just felt weird because they hadn't, obviously they'd broached the subject of the possibility of Aaron and Joan, and obviously there was some tension and stuff, but freshly off of Nick dying, they're having sex. So this is one of the things that is kind of paralleled with the Infernal Devices, which is one of my favorite, that was one of the series that has been my favorite since I read them. But something about the Infernal Devices one I could stomach better than this one. I thought this was really rushed, really forced, really... I don't know. It just felt strange, the fact that Nick had just died. They both watched him die. And then their first thing is to go back and start having sex. I don't know. That just wasn't it for me. About 65% of the way through, it was definitely getting more into the polyamorous side, which I felt weird about. And to be honest, it almost ruined it for me. I just think if you have to spend that much time of the book while they're trying to save the world, they are in the midst of trying to save the world, trying to reset their timeline to the correct timeline. They've got a lot of stuff going on, right? But here they are trying to figure out their polyamorous relationship. I don't know. The way it came about just felt too forced. It felt too... They're taking way too much time to deal with this. You know what you need to do? If you're going to do that, give them both a kiss goodbye. Get your butt going on the mission again. Like, don't have a 20-minute discussion about what you are to each other and what you want from each other when all of this is through. Do a real quick, peck, hey, and that lets them know, hey, if we survive this, this is what I'm after. But, I don't know. I don't know. It just felt weird taking that much time to deal with the polyamorous side of things. And again, young adult. I don't feel like this should be classified as young adult at this point. I just don't think that kids should be worried about that. And young adult books are classified as being from 12 to 18, I think. Maybe 12 to 20. So you got to cater to that 12 age range if you're going to be considered young adult. Otherwise, go for just being an adult book. I like adult fantasy books. It's fun. Obviously, I like adult fantasy books. Fourth Wing, Assistant to the Villain. There are so many adult fantasy books that you could have put this into instead of young adult. I don't know. I guess that's what I'm saying. So, whenever I do end up doing my reread, if I feel like they are very similar and I was being biased, if I feel the same way about Cassandra Clare's books now, I will issue a full apology about my rating on this book, and I'll bring the rating up. But as it stands, with my current feelings, I gave it a 3 out of 5, because it kind of fell off for me. There was too much focus on the wrong things. It's a 3.6 overall. It's on Libby, and the cheapest option is Kindle for $7.99. Next, I read Legendary by Stephanie Garber. This is the second one in the Caraval series, so I'm not going to read the synopsis again because Caraval was the first one. I read that one a couple months ago, I believe. I listened to this one on Libby from December 10th to December 15th. I wasn't sure how I would feel about the point of view switching to Donatella. Whenever it initially did it, I was like, oh, don't know how I feel about that, because I got used to Scarlet. I got used to Scarlet, and I liked Scarlet. I liked Julian. So I wanted more of her point of view, but we got Donatella instead, and I was like, But then Dante, and he saved it. Dante, I ended up loving him. I'm trying to think of who he had the vibe of. He had the vibe of Daniel Gregory in the Fallen series is the vibe that he had, and I love Daniel Gregory. So I love Dante. They're one and the same for me. So there are so many references that I feel like I missed in the first book that kind of came to my attention in this one. I am not a classic book reader very much, but I did take a literature class in college, my first go around. And so I made a couple connections from that class. So the first one being Dante. Dante, I feel like, is referencing Dante's Inferno. Literally, Scarlett and Donatella's mother is named Paradise the Lost, which is obviously pulling from Paradise Lost by John Milton, in my mind. And then Scarlet, I feel like, could be the Scarlet Letter. Now, I'm because I'm not a huge classic literature person, and because that's been 10 years ago since I've had that class, I can't think of how that impacted the story at all. But maybe somebody who is a classic literature nerd, and I say nerd in the best way possible. If you're a classic literature nerd and you read these books, maybe you can make some additional connections. It's kind of like, and it's funny that I've already brought up Daniel Gregory, it's kind of like the Fallen series when I was trying to talk my friend Sammy into reading the books, and I let him read the description on the back of the Fallen book. And he said, Gregory, so this must be about fallen angels, right? I, not knowing any lore about the Gregories and fallen angels and the connections there, had no idea that was connection. So for him to guess what the twist was in that book just based off the name, somebody might be able to do the same thing with this book based on the names of these characters. So more power to you if you can. I would not be able to tell you a darn thing. I was just there for the story. I just happened to make some of those connections that might not even be real connections. That might not have been her intention at all. That's just where my brain went. Stephanie Garber has such a magical way with words. Like, I absolutely love it. At one point, she said, he kissed Tella in a way that made her wonder if Jules ever wished to be stolen by thieves, or something like that. Obviously, I was listening to it, so I had to kind of jot it down from memory. But, oh my gosh, that is beautiful writing, and it made my heart ache. I ached to hear that. That was, oh, I love it. And every now and then she would talk about how it seemed like the stars were leaning in, and it was all this personification of inanimate objects, and it was beautiful. It's a beautiful way of writing, and her Once Upon a Broken Heart books are the same way, and I love it. Speaking of which, I did find out why. Whenever I was reading the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, for anybody who wasn't here for that debrief, I think that was back in July, maybe. I had read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I got to the last one, which is A Curse for True Love, and it had. I happened to be scrolling on social media one day, and I saw somebody say that you were supposed to read the Caraval series before you read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. And I was like, I'm too deep in now. I'm almost done with the series. I'm not about to stop reading it and go to this other series based on a social media post that I saw. So I kept going and I read it. Well, now that I've read the second book in the Caraval series, I can say with 100% certainty that yes, you do want to read this series first. You want to read this series first. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, it's got Jax in it from the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. This is where we meet him for the first time, and he is still a douche in this one. Like, obviously he's a douche through a lot of the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, but obviously he gets his redemption at the end. We learn more about him, so it's easier to like him. And now it's back to him being a douche. Probably a bigger douche than he was in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So anybody who's thinking about reading either one of these series, start with Caraval. At the same time, it's not entirely necessary to understand either. I am a chronological girly. I like reading things chronologically. Whenever I go back and reread the Cassandra Clare stuff, it's going to be chronological, not release date. So if you're like me and you like that, Caraval's the way to go. But just reading one series or the other is not going to hinder your understanding of either story. I originally gave it a 3.75, but I, honest to God, don't know why I did that, so I moved it up to a 4. It's a 4.1 overall. I read it on Libby, and the cheapest option is $8.11 on paperback with $9.99 an option on Kindle. Worth the money. After that is when I did my reread of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This is the second time that I've read it, and Kasey has already read the description. I can't remember if it was in her last Kasey's Corner or if it was in the last debrief she was a part of. But either way, go and listen to her thoughts on it, and then come back and listen to my thoughts, and then tell us your thoughts. I listened on Audible again from December 12th to December 17th. This is, and we mentioned it in the Brimstone Book Club episode last week. This is the book that got us started on the podcast because we met in the park and we talked about it, and then I want to say it was only like 2 days later is when Allie was like, what would you guys think about starting a podcast? And obviously my first instinct was, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I actually said it out loud with her not even there because she had sent a Snapchat video. So that is the significance of this book. Amazing world building, love and heartbreak. Love that. I noticed things I hadn't noticed before, and that was cool. I always like doing that with rereads because you don't notice everything the first go around. Also, I originally... No. I think I lied to you. I didn't read it on Audible the first time. I read it on Kindle Unlimited because it was on Kindle Unlimited back then. So this was my first time listening to it. So maybe that's why I picked up on some things that I had missed the first go around. Allie mentioned something about the seating arrangement at dinner time, and I've seen other people mention it. I was oblivious to it. So if you noticed anything about the seating arrangement in the dining room and how it differed, let me know because I'm kind of curious. And obviously Allie's curious because she mentioned it in whenever she did her reread. Oh, that's what it was. Allie did a reread. Kasey didn't do a reread yet. That'll be in her Kasey's Corner that's coming up this week. But go back and listen to Allie's point of view, and then you'll have all three of ours by the end of this week. I talked about in the Brimstone episode about how I had originally made this a 4 because it was on Goodreads, and Goodreads doesn't have quarter ratings. So I have since moved to Fable. I mean, technically I'm doing all 3 this year, but on Fable I moved it up to a 4.25. It is a 4.3 overall, which I think is accurate. Oh, I moved it up to a 4.5, not a 4.25. Anyway, it's a 4.3 overall, which I feel like is a good rating for this book. It is still on Kindle Unlimited. I did make that note. And the cheapest option is $8.19 paperback, $9.99 on Kindle. After that, I read Brimstone by Callie Hart. We were originally going to film the Brimstone episode the Saturday before Christmas, and I started this one on December 17th. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to rush through this. But then sickness and holiday craziness, and we didn't end up getting to film. And so I got to kind of relax after that. But anyway, I read it from December 17th to December 22nd. And if you want to hear my thoughts on this, go to our Brimstone episode from last week. Obviously, there's going to be major spoilers in it. So, only watch if you've read it. Anyway, one of the things that I would like to say that I've done a little bit more research on, I saw where it was an editing issue with having Carrion in two different places. We mentioned that briefly in the episode. Since then, I've learned that was supposed to be taken out, and Callie Hart is actually extremely upset that it was left in. That was an error on her team's part, and she is obviously upset about it. So I can definitely give her some grace on that. That should be one of the things that her team listens to her on. So in case you were curious, and in case you had heard about it as well and were curious, that is what the situation is. I did originally give this a 4.25, and in the episode, as we were talking, I did move it down to a 3.75. So it is still a 4.2 overall, though. And the cheapest option is $11.99 on Kindle. After that, I would, and if I had known we weren't going to be filming that Saturday as we originally planned, I would have listened to this one first, because the next one I read was on December 23rd. I read the Quicksilver bonus scenes, the Kingfisher's point of view. Obviously, it's really quick. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes long, so reading at 2 times speed, I finished it in a little bit over an hour. I don't think it was entirely necessary. I don't know. It doesn't... There's things that don't make sense to me about the bonus scenes. For one thing, it didn't make sense that Renfis's sister's ghost hinted at a possible love connection between her and Kingfisher. Like, almost like a what could have been type thing. But the entire time that Kingfisher has been without his mom, I mean, his mom knew that his mate was coming. His mom told him that his mate was coming. What do you mean, like, they're even hinting at a possibility that there could be anybody else? Why would you settle for anybody else if you know your mate's going to be coming? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. And maybe that's a me thing. Maybe that's I don't know. One and only top love feels like it should be one and only. Not to mention that they had this conversation while he was in the mouth of a dragon. Dude, just focus on getting out. Don't talk to the ghost about what could have been, even though it shouldn't have been anyway, because you have a mate coming. That would have just ended in heartbreak for both of them, knowing that the mate was coming. I don't know. Also, one thing that confused me, I wasn't sure if this novella was confirming the fact that Kingfisher knew his real name, his true name, the whole time, or if it was, I don't know, because there's a scene where his mom told him to guard his name. So does that mean he actually knew it the whole time and he lied to Saris about not knowing it at the beginning of Brimstone? I really don't know how to interpret it. So if somebody else has read it and can explain it to me down in the comments, I would really appreciate it. My favorite part of this book was the fact that he was actually in the room with Saris when she was looking for the bathroom in the first book. I thought that was very interesting. Him and Onyx both. Like, he shrouded them in shadows to keep hidden from her, and then conjured up the bathroom for her because she made a comment about wondering where the bathroom was, and he just made one for her with a steaming bath and everything. Like, I gave it a 3 out of 5. It's definitely not anything vital to the series in my eyes, but I've seen people say that it is, so maybe I don't know. Maybe it's where I read Quicksilver and Brimstone before reading this one. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. The only thing that could potentially be missing is if what his mom said about guarding his name is talking about his true name, in which case we know that he lied to Saris about not knowing his real name at the beginning of Brimstone. So that's the only thing that I can think of that would make it necessary, but drop a comment down below if I'm just missing something. I gave it a 3. It's a 4 overall. From what I can tell, it's an Audible exclusive. So, and it's much cheaper than a credit. It was $4.19. Even the non-member price was $4.19. The member price, I got it for $3.14, I'm pretty sure. If you're going to get it, don't use a credit because it's a waste of a credit. They're going to waste some money if you do that. So, just buy it outright. My next one was The Handmaid by Freida McFadden. Obviously, you had to see what all the hype was about. I did read Never Lie last year at some point. I just can't remember when. And that was my first Freida book. This is my second. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think I'm going to continue. I read this one because of the hype surrounding it. So, let's get into it. I read it on Kindle Unlimited from December 23rd to December 28th. And I was originally going to put it on Libby and listen to it, but the wait was several months. There were, in our library, there were 19 copies in use and 2,389 people waiting. I'll put the screenshot over here for you to see, because that was 126 people waiting per copy. That's when Allie reminded me that it was on Kindle Unlimited, and I have never been so grateful in my life. So, what a major disappointment, though. I'm really glad I didn't spend a credit on this. I'm really glad that I didn't spend money on this. I was very disappointed. I don't know when I've ever been so underwhelmed by a book I was so looking forward to reading. Maybe Powerless, but even in that, even then, I had gone into it knowing that there was plagiarism allegations. So I knew I wasn't going to be I wasn't going to be able to fully enjoy it, and I knew that. So yeah, I don't know when the last time I've felt this way about a book I was really looking forward to. And I knew it was going to be a case of the husband is the actual psychotic one, not the wife, like Freida wanted the reader to think. I saw that coming from a mile away. That was not a twist at all. Also, there were other super unrealistic things, too, about this. So you're telling me that there were absolutely no red flags with Andrew before he locked his wife in the attic to punish her? You're telling me they were together for months. I realized that they got married early, but they were together for months, and there were no red flags, no spark of anger that she saw at some point, and it made her like, whoa. Oh, well, I can ignore that. I mean, he just got angry, you know? Like, this is the first time anything has come up. I don't know. Feels weird to me. I don't buy it. How did his previous fiance get away? She obviously saw some behavior before they were married. How did Nina not? Also, the dad of the previous fiance he has said that he had suspicions about Andrew and that he had messed up Kathleen in some way. because she changed her name and wouldn't date again and completely moved away. And he didn't think to maybe check in on the new wife later on. If he knew something was going on with her, with his daughter and this man, even if he had a suspicion, if he's in law enforcement, I feel like he's got the means to be able to do a little bit of surveillance on him. Especially when he knows that a new wife has come along. That's just me. Andrew should not have been able to get into, and this is a banker thing. So at one point, Nina has, she has a safe deposit box too, that she has put fake IDs into and the ability for her and her daughter to run. Andrew finds one of them. But he should not have been able to get into that safe deposit box. The way our bank works is you have to be an authorized signer. If she went and set it up on her own, she definitely wouldn't have taken Andrew with her to make him an authorized signer. She definitely wouldn't have even brought him up to them. There would be no connection to him and her with that safe deposit box. He should not have been able to get into that. That is a flaw. When Nina runs to, okay, this is one that like really makes me mad. Okay, when Nina runs to Enzo after Andrew gets into the safe deposit box and gets the thing, she makes the comment that her and Enzo's relationship is like brother and sister, probably because he's kind of making up for the fact that he didn't do enough for his own sister. Whenever she was in an abusive relationship, like he's kind of paying penance a little bit by helping Nina escape her abuser when he didn't do enough for his own sister, and his own sister ended up dying because he didn't intervene. He, not saying that it's his fault, but he feels that guilt and he's trying to assuage that with Nina this go around. And she literally makes the comment that it's a brother-sister relationship. And you're telling me the very next chapter or two, they're having sex? What? And then, to make it even worse, they don't even end up together. What was the point of having sex? It would make more sense for Enzo to have ended up with Millie. It would have made more sense for him to have those feelings toward Millie if the relationship of brother and sister was already established for Enzo and Nina. Why ruin that with sex? Why ruin that? Why make it weird like that? Why say they're like brother and sister and then they're having sex? That's dumb. That's bad writing, I feel like. What was the point? It doesn't make any sense. Another thing that makes sense with this book, Andrew's dad just let his wife discipline their son in such a sadistic manner and never tried to stop her. Yeah, it said he worked a lot, but again, you're telling me there were no signs of how she was treating their son and he didn't intervene when he saw those signs? She literally pulled his teeth out. That was the significance with Millie making him pull his teeth out whenever she had him locked up, was that his mom had done that to him before. Because if he wasn't going to take care of him, then he had lost his right to his teeth. So you're telling me this kid is missing teeth. Yeah, they're baby teeth. But he's missing teeth. And the dad just does nothing? Says nothing? Because there's got to be, it's got to be a behavioral thing. Like he has to act a certain way toward his mom after that, right? The dad has to notice. And he did nothing. That doesn't make sense to me. Also, Andrew was really buddy-buddy with his mom after she did all that stuff to him. And the pulling the teeth was the only thing we knew. Obviously, he got that behavior pattern from her, but wouldn't he want revenge on his mom? Wouldn't he want revenge on his mom in the same way the girls wanted revenge on him? Why was he was in love with his mother. He was in love with his mother. It was a weird dynamic. I hated it. Millie said the girl she killed this one got me too. This one really made me mad because I put myself in that girl's shoes. And I got to thinking of how I would react. And the way this girl reacted is inexcusable and dumb. I don't think that would ever happen. I don't think that would ever happen. So here's what it was. Millie, one of the things that Millie does, the reason that she was in jail for that time before she got this job is because she walked in on somebody taking advantage of one of her friends, trying to sexually assault her. And she got a blunt object and beat him over the head and kept beating him over the head until he stopped moving. And so he died. Feel like that's a warranted death. So she later goes on to say that her friend never looked at her the same. In fact, whenever she saw her again, she looked at her with disgust. Millie has just saved your life. Because you would be scarred after that. Any bit of sexual abuse scars a person. She would have been scarred, even if she lived through it. So she just saved your life and kept you from having to go through all this pain and all this suffering. And you have the gall to look at her in disgust. If one of my friends, if Allie or Kasey decided, or if Allie and Kasey walked in on somebody trying to sexually assault me and killed that man for me, I would owe them my life. I would owe them my life. And I would treat them as such. They would be, I would never be able to make up for what they've done for me. I would never look at them in disgust over having killed a man when that man was trying to take advantage of me. That's dumb. That's bad writing. Because I feel like most girls would be in my situation, would feel like I do about the situation, not this girl. I think all of those added up to bad writing as a whole. I don't think the book is worth the hype. I won't recommend this book. And I will never read the others that are in the series. There's no getting better from this disappointment. There's no coming back from this disappointment. In fact, I will instead recommend The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. It is 10 times the story that this one is. And it's also on Kindle Unlimited. I was going to watch the movie, but after reading it and also hearing that they embellished on the sex scenes, no thank you. Because that was another thing. We're all aware of the hotel scene and how amazing Sydney Sweeney looks in it. No denying, she's hot. But after reading the book, there were no scenes like that. That was the most fade to black sex scenes I've ever read. It went over absolutely nothing. You know what happened? They kissed in the cab, and then they woke up in the next chapter, naked in bed. That's what happened. Why is everything so overly sexual now? What is the point of seeing two people basically having sex? Just in a regular movie. When did it stop becoming a big deal? You know, they used to not even show any bedroom scenes, including just, talking to each other in bed on TV. They used to never even show that. I get that that's a little bit strict, but you see how far we've come. Why are we just normalizing having an unnecessary sex scene in everything? Everything. It's exhausting. One thing with this book, I felt like she was trying to go for the shock factor, kind of like Colleen Hoover does, where she always adds something that's a little bit, jarring. It just, in Layla, he eats her hair. That's weird. And it shocks you. So I feel like she was going for that. Freida was in this book with some of the things. It just didn't make sense. It was stiff. It was poorly written. I gave it a 2 out of 5. It's a 4.2 overall. Again, I'm convinced it's because they haven't read The Last Mrs. Parrish. So read that instead. However, if you're stuck on wanting to read The Housemaid because it's popular right now and because, you want to go watch the movie afterwards, it's on Kindle Unlimited. As of these notes, which would have been right at the end of the year, the Audible version was on sale for $5.45, which is cheaper than a credit. Still feels like a waste of money though, but hey, you do you. Go read The Last Mrs. Parrish, because it's also on Kindle Unlimited. All right, so after that, I read a 7-page book by Kelvin V.A. Allison called Mary. I read it on Kindle Unlimited on December 30th. Amanda had recommended this to me. She said for a 7-page book, it's actually very terrifying. And yes, it did. It was very eerie in the first few pages. But once I realized what was going on, I was like, oh, so Kelvin is a vegetarian. Got it. Very clear to see. No doubt about it. Overall, that's all my feelings on it. The only reason I even included it, I didn't even know whether to include it in my final tally of the year because it was 7 pages, But the only reason I included it is because it had an option, it was an option on Fable. It was listed as a full book on Fable, so I was like, if it's listed, I'll count it. For instance, the Man Who Would Not Shake Hands is not listed on Fable as a book, as a short story from the Skeleton Crew, so I didn't include that one in my numbers because I haven't read the entire book of the Skeleton Crew. So, and I keep saying I think it's just Skeleton Crew, for anybody who's curious. And for anybody who knows and they've been listening to me say the Skeleton Crew and they're like, it's Skeleton Crew. I get it. I'm sorry. Anyway, if anybody is mad at me for including this in my tally, keep in mind that I still read 96 books even without this one. So, still met my goal. I was generous with 2.5 out of 5. It's a 2.4 overall. It is, if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, it's only $1.15. And Kindle is the only option to read this, whether you have Kindle Unlimited or you have to buy it. So I would say don't waste your money. Anyway, the very last book of the year has actually kickstarted my new year starting on a nerd level. Because I listened to Xenocide by Orson Scott Card. He is quickly becoming a favorite of mine. I do have the next one. Gosh, I can't remember what the name of it is. But the next one chronologically, I'm going to be listening to is in my on my Libby shelf now. So just waiting for Monday on my drive to work. So I listened to this one on Xenocide on Libby from December 26th to December 31st. And I genuinely didn't start these books expecting to be so into a sci-fi world. But Orson Scott Card has me absolutely hooked. From the first one, he's had me hooked, and this one was even better. It started off, there were more psychological aspects to this one that it was so intriguing. It keeps you thinking about how much of it, because it's just like the very first conversation is between a man and his dying wife, and they're just kind of volleying back and forth of, you know, how to feel about certain things. They're having these psychological and super deep conversations as their last conversation, and it's super sweet. And but it also makes you think a little bit, and that goes on through so much of this book. I mean, all of them have to go through this struggle. It's of what's right and what's wrong, and how do they save themselves without dooming another race. It's amazing how thought-provoking it is. And genuinely, a lot of it, as crazy as it sounds, a lot of the psychological stuff that they talk about can be applied to our own world and current situations, and there's so much science that can be in everyday connections. I know it's a sci-fi book, but I 100% hand on the Bible feel smarter after reading that book just because of the psychological aspect of it. I don't know how to explain the connection, but somehow the world building in this one makes me even more excited for my Throne of Glass reread. I do plan on doing that this year. I want to do a physical reread. It'll be my first time physically reading the books, and something about this world building and stuff puts me in mind of it. I'm so excited. I found out at the end, because there was another author's aside where he talked to us. I found out at the end that this was originally supposed to be one book, and it was split into two because of how long it got. In his author's note, he said it took no convincing his editors to split the book because they loved the idea of getting to sell twice as many books for the same story, he said. So, by the way, this book was 20 hours long. 416 pages, and there were only 18 chapters. At one point, I was in a chapter that was showing 3 hours long for one chapter. That was the longest chapter in the book, but all of them were, I mean, think about it. There were 18 chapters. One chapter was 3 hours. It was a 20-hour long book. I mean, that still makes an hour a chapter on average. Obviously, there were some longer ones and some shorter ones, but crazy. I will say, my least favorite thing about these audiobooks is how ununiform they are. And what I mean by that is sometimes it'll start with going back and forth between a male and a female narrator, depending on who's talking. And then in the middle of the conversation, it will pick one of the narrators and stick with that one for the rest of the interaction. Sometimes for the rest of the chapter, and the flipping from, a male reading the male parts, a female reading the female parts, to one of them reading all of the parts, it was very jarring, and I could hear it, and so it kind of messed with me a little bit. And that's been going on for all 3 of these books that I've read so far. So it didn't take away from the story, but it did make me curious as to why, but not curious enough to find out on my own. So if somebody just like knows that answer, drop a comment down below and let me know. I gave it 4.75 out of 5. It's only a 3.8 overall, though, which is very surprising to me. I liked it. It's on Libby, and I didn't realize it's on Kindle Unlimited. It's $6.84 paperback is the cheapest option beyond that. So try it out. It's a good book. I would say read Speaker for the Dead, before reading this one, because it does have some backstory that you need. Obviously, Ender's Game was kind of the kickstart of learning about Ender. So you could start with that one. But as far as the story itself, it's mainly, it's following the main storyline of Speaker for the Dead. So you at least need to read that one. Anyway, that was my month. That was a total of 10 books, 9 if you don't count Mary. And yeah, I feel like that was a good end to the year. But I am curious on what all you read and what your favorites were from the month of December and what your least favorite ones were. Did you agree with my thoughts? I'm especially curious on The Housemaid. Are you mad at me for my thoughts, or do you agree with me? What are your thoughts? Let's talk about all of it down below, or come find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, The Unfinished TBR. We've got an email, theunfinishedtbr@gmail.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify with brand new episodes every single Monday, so you might as well subscribe so you don't miss a thing. We will see you next week for our 2025 year-end recap. And that is going to have Allie and Kasey again. So, stay tuned for that. Love you. Have a good week. Bye.